The mahogany desk between us might as well have been a chasm. My mother sat on one side, her fingers laced so tightly her knuckles had gone white. On the other side, my soon-to-be ex-husband Marcus lounged like he owned the place, which, technically, he did. It was his lawyer's office, after all. "Emma, sweetheart," Mom said, and I hated the pleading in her voice. "Just sign it, please." The document in front of me wasn't the divorce papers. I'd already signed those, already agreed to walk away from 8 years of marriage with nothing but my clothes and my student loans. No, this was the withdrawal form for my bar complaint against Richard Chen, Marcus's attorney. The man who had, I was now certain, helped my husband hide millions in assets while painting me as an unstable gold digger in court. "I'm not signing." My voice came out steadier than I felt. Marcus's laugh was sharp. "Emma, don't be stupid. You think anyone's going to believe you? A paralegal with a grudge against one of the best attorneys in the state? He falsified evidence. He coached witnesses. He did his job," Marcus interrupted, "which is more than you ever did. How many years did you waste in that dead-end position, Emma? How many times did I tell you to go to law school, make something of yourself? But no, you were too scared, too comfortable." The familiar shame tried to rise in my chest, but I pushed it down. I'd found the emails. I'd found the doctored bank statements. I had proof that Richard Chen had crossed every ethical line in the book to make sure Marcus kept his money, and I got nothing. "Mrs. Lawson." Richard Chen himself appeared in the doorway, immaculate in his three-piece suit. He'd been Marcus's fraternity brother at Yale, back when they were both young men who thought the world owed them everything. Now he was the attorney who'd made sure Marcus's tech company shares, valued at $14 million, simply disappeared from our asset division. "I understand you're having second thoughts." "I'm not signing." He settled into the chair beside Marcus, his expression radiating practiced sympathy. "I appreciate your passion, but you need to understand the reality here. That complaint? It's going nowhere. You have no evidence, no witnesses, no credibility. What you do have is a very precarious situation. Is that a threat? It's a fact." He slid a folder across the desk. "Your mother's medical bills. Stage 3 cancer treatment doesn't come cheap, does it? I believe she's currently on your brother's insurance plan. Your brother David, who works for Marcus's company as chief operations officer." The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of the desk. "David's been a valuable employee," Marcus said, examining his nails. "Be a shame if we had to restructure, downsize. You know how it is in tech. One day you're essential, the next day you're redundant." Mom's voice was barely a whisper. "Emma, please, I can't lose the insurance, the treatments." "You see?" Richard's smile was gentle, almost kind. "There's no win for you here. Even if the Bar Association took your complaint seriously, and they won't, it would take years to investigate. Years your mother doesn't have. Meanwhile, you'll have made powerful enemies. No law firm in this state will hire you. Your references will dry up. Your brother will lose his job, his insurance, everything." "Just sign it," Mom begged, yes. "Let it go, please, baby, just let it go." I looked at her, really looked. The scarf covering her thinning hair, the shadows under her eyes. The way her hands shook slightly, a side effect of the chemo. She'd already lost Dad to a heart attack 3 years ago. She'd already been through so much. David wasn't even here. He'd refused to come, sent me a text instead. "Don't do this, Em. Some battles aren't worth fighting." My hand reached for the pen. "Smart girl," Richard murmured. I signed my name. Emma Lawson. Each letter felt like a betrayal of myself. But what choice did I have? Mom exhaled in relief. Marcus's grin was triumphant. Richard Chen added the form to his folder with the casual efficiency of a man who'd won countless victories just like this one. "Pleasure doing business with you," he said. I walked out of that office in a daze. Got into my beat-up Honda Civic, the one asset Marcus had generously let me keep. drove toward my new studio apartment, the one I could barely afford on my paralegal salary. I didn't see the truck run the red light. One moment I was stopped at an intersection, my mind numb with defeat. The next, there was a scream of metal and the world went white with pain. I remember thinking, absurdly, that at least Mom would get the insurance. At least David would keep his job. At least I wouldn't have to live with what I'd done. Then there was nothing. Then there was everything. I gasped awake in my childhood bedroom. The pink wallpaper I'd begged Mom to let me replace when I was 16. The desk still covered with law school brochures I'd never sent in. The framed photo of me and Marcus at our college graduation, his arm around my waist, both of us grinning like we'd conquered the world. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Dinner at 7? We need to talk about the prenup. Prenup. I grabbed the phone with shaking hands. The date stamp read April 15th, 2018, 7 years ago, 6 months before my wedding. I ran to the mirror. My face stared back, 25 years old, free of the lines that grief and betrayal had etched there. My hair was longer, healthier. My eyes were... I was alive. No, I whispered. No, this isn't... But it was. Somehow, impossibly, I was back. Back before the marriage, before the divorce, before the final humiliation in Richard Chen's office. Back when I still had choices. My hands were still shaking when I opened my laptop. I had to know if my memories were real or if I'd had some kind of psychotic break. I searched for Richard Chen's law firm. There he was, partner at Chen & Associates, specializing in family law and corporate litigation. His website boasted a 98% success rate and glowing testimonials. His headshot showed that same practiced smile, that same air of absolute confidence. I searched for myself. Emma Lawson, paralegal at Davidson & White, engaged to Marcus Lawson, set to marry in October 2018. It was all real. I was really here, really back. The prenup meeting. I remembered it from before. Marcus had shown up to my apartment with Richard Chen in tow, presented me with a 60-page document that essentially said, if we divorced for any reason, I would leave with exactly what I'd brought in. Nothing. I'd been hurt, confused, we'd fought. But eventually I'd signed, because I loved him, because I trusted him, because I was 25 and stupid and thought love conquered all. Not this time. I texted back, can't do dinner, something came up. His response was immediate. Emma, we need to finalize this. Richard's billing me by the hour. Then maybe you should have a lawyer who doesn't overcharge his fraternity brothers. I typed, then deleted. No, I couldn't tip my hand. Not yet. Sorry, family emergency. My mom needs me. That was safe enough. Mom had been diagnosed with cancer in March, was just starting treatment. Fine, tomorrow then. This can't wait forever. I set the phone down and tried to think. In my previous life, I'd signed the prenup, married Marcus in a beautiful ceremony that cost more than my yearly salary, worked as his dutiful wife, his support system, while he built his company from a startup into a multi-million-dollar success. I'd networked at his business dinners, proofread his presentations, managed his household so he could focus on work for 8 years. And when he decided to upgrade to someone younger, his 23-year-old marketing assistant to be precise, Richard Chen had made sure I walked away with nothing. But I had something now that I didn't have before. I had knowledge. I had 7 years of memories from a future that hadn't happened yet. I knew about Marcus's hidden offshore accounts. I knew about the company shares he'd transferred to his brother's name. I knew every dirty trick Richard Chen would pull. And I knew something else. Something I'd discovered too late in my previous life. After the divorce was final, and I'd started digging into Richard Chen's history out of pure spite. Richard Chen was dirty. Not just in my case. In dozens of cases. I'd spent months piecing it together before my death, driven by rage and grief and the need to understand how I'd lost everything. I'd talked to other paralegals, other scorned ex-wives, other lawyers who'd faced him in court. I'd found the patterns, the witnesses who'd changed their testimony, the evidence that had mysteriously appeared or disappeared, the bank accounts that couldn't be found. But I'd found them too late. By the time I'd filed my bar complaint, Richard had covered his tracks, My evidence was circumstantial. My witnesses were too scared to talk. The Bar Association had dismissed my complaint as the bitter ravings of a woman who'd lost her divorce. Then Marcus and David and Richard had forced me to withdraw it, and then I'd died. Not this time. This time, I knew which cases to look at. This time, I knew who to talk to. This time, I had 7 years to destroy Richard Chen before he ever got the chance to destroy me. I opened a new document and started writing. Everything I could remember. Every case. Every suspicious detail. Every thread I'd pulled in that other life. The Hendricks divorce, 2019. Wife lost custody of her kids despite the husband's documented rage issues. Therapist's report had been altered. The Morrison estate case, 2020. Elder abuse, millions in assets transferred days before the grandmother died. Witnesses had recanted their statements. The Zhang business dispute, 2021. Contract fraud, smoking gun evidence had been ruled inadmissible on a technicality that Richard had orchestrated. The Patterson medical malpractice, 2022. Doctor clearly liable, but the victim's own medical records had been corrected to show pre-existing conditions. The Kumar immigration case, 2023. Family separated. Deportation orders that shouldn't have been enforceable. Documents filed late deliberately. 5 cases. 5 clear instances of ethical violations, evidence tampering, witness coaching. In my previous life, I'd found the connections too late. This time, I'd find them in time. I worked through the night, building my timeline, mapping out my strategy. By dawn, my eyes were gritty and my coffee had gone cold, but I had a plan. Step 1, don't marry Marcus. Step 2, become a lawyer. Step 3, destroy Richard Chen. The next morning, I called Marcus. I can't marry you. Silence on the other end. Then, what? The prenup. It's not about the money, Marcus. It's about what it means. If you trust me so little that you need a 60-page contract to protect yourself, then we shouldn't be getting married. Emma, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. I'm saying no. If you want to marry me, we do it without the prenup. If the prenup is more important to you than I am, then we're not right for each other. Richard said you'd react like this. He said women always get emotional about prenups. Then Richard can marry you. I'm done. I hung up. My hands were shaking again, but this time it felt good. Powerful, like I was taking something back. Marcus called back immediately. I didn't answer. He texted, "You're being crazy. Call me back." Then, "Emma, seriously, let's talk about this." Then, "You're going to regret this." I blocked his number. Mom called an hour later. "Sweetheart, Marcus called me. He's worried about you. He said you're having second thoughts." I'm not having second thoughts. I'm having clear thoughts for the first time. But the wedding, everything's planned. Can be canceled. Mom, I need to tell you something. I'm going to law school. Another pause. What? I've been thinking about it for a while. Lie. I'd been thinking about it for exactly 12 hours of this timeline. I don't want to be a paralegal forever. I want more. And I can't do that with Marcus. He doesn't support my ambitions. He wants a wife who'll stay home and host dinner parties. He makes good money, Emma. Security isn't something to throw away lightly. I know, but I can make my own security. I'm smart enough. I'm capable enough. I just need to believe in myself. The words felt strange in my mouth. In my previous life, I'd never believed in myself. I'd let Marcus's doubt become my doubt. I'd let his dismissiveness convince me I wasn't good enough. But I'd had 7 years to learn exactly how good I was. 7 years of studying the law from the outside, watching lawyers work, understanding the systems. 7 years of building a case against Richard Chen that would have worked if only I'd had the credibility to bring it. This time, I'd have that credibility. Are you sure? Mom asked softly. I've never been more sure of anything. I hung up and opened my laptop. LSAT prep courses, law school applications, scholarships. I had the advantage of knowing exactly what was coming, the cases I'd worked on as a paralegal, the legal principles I'd learned, the arguments I'd seen succeed and fail. The LSAT was in 3 months. In my previous timeline, I'd scored a 165 without studying, just out of curiosity, then talked myself out of applying because Marcus had said it was a waste of time. This time, I studied like my life depended on it, because it did. I quit my job at Davidson and White. My supervisor was sorry to see me go, said I had real talent, asked if I'd ever considered law school. I told him I was already planning on it. His recommendation letter was glowing. I scored a 178 on the LSAT. I got into Harvard Law with a full scholarship. And Marcus sent me one final text from a number I didn't recognize. "You'll regret this. You think you can do better than me? You're nobody, Emma. You'll always be nobody." I saved that text. Someday, I thought, I'd show it to him when I was somebody. Law school was brutal, but I'd lived through 8 years of marriage to Marcus and the devastating divorce that followed. I'd lived through my mother's cancer and my own poverty and the final humiliation of being forced to withdraw the one thing that could have given my suffering meaning. Compared to all that, law school was easy. I finished top of my class, made law review, clerked for a federal judge, and when I graduated, I didn't join a big firm. Instead, I opened my own practice, specializing in legal ethics violations. It was 2022, 4 years after I'd been reborn, 3 years after the Hendricks divorce was finalized in my previous timeline, leaving Jessica Hendricks without her children and without justice. But in this timeline, it hadn't happened yet. In this timeline, I'd been watching, waiting, building my credentials and my reputation. And when Jessica Hendricks walked into a consultation with Richard Chen, I was ready. I'd joined every legal networking group, every bar association committee, every professional organization I could find. I'd made myself visible, credible, trustworthy. And I'd made sure people knew. If you had concerns about your lawyer's ethics, I was the person to call. Jessica Hendricks' sister called me on a Tuesday afternoon. "My name is Lauren Hendricks. My sister is going through a divorce and something's not right with her lawyer's behavior." "Tell me everything," I said. The story spilled out. The husband, James Hendricks, had a documented history of rage issues, holes punched in walls, neighbors who'd heard screaming, a police call that had resulted in no charges because James was friends with half the department. But Jessica's therapist, Dr. Sarah Morrison, had been documenting everything. The bruises Jessica explained away, the fear in her voice, the way she flinched when James was mentioned. Dr. Morrison's report was supposed to be submitted to the court as evidence in the custody hearing. And then something changed, Lauren said. The report Dr. Morrison actually submitted barely mentioned any of it. It made Jessica sound unstable, like she was making things up. "Do you know who your sister's husband's lawyer is?" "Richard Chen. He's supposed to be the best." "He's supposed to be," I agreed. "Can I speak with your sister?" Jessica Hendricks was a wreck, thin, exhausted, terrified of losing her kids. I know what I told Dr. Morrison. I know what she wrote in her notes. But the report that went to the judge was different. When I asked her about it, she said that was what she'd submitted. But I saw her notes months ago when she showed me. They were different. "Did you keep any copies?" "No, I didn't think I needed to. I trusted her." "What about your current lawyer?" "He's fine, I guess, but he's not pushing very hard. He keeps saying we need to focus on compromise, on co-parenting, but I can't co-parent with James. He scares me." I knew what had happened. In my previous timeline, Richard Chen had gotten to Dr. Morrison somehow, bribed her, threatened her, something. The report had been altered, Jessica had lost custody, and by the time anyone realized the truth, it was too late. "Jessica, I need you to do something for me. I need you to request Dr. Morrison's complete file. All her session notes, all her correspondence. You have a right to your own mental health records." "Okay, but why?" "Because I think your husband's lawyer tampered with evidence, and I'm going to prove it." It took 2 weeks. Jessica submitted the request, and Dr. Morrison's office complied. What arrived was a stack of session notes that painted a very different picture than the report submitted to court. I compared them side by side. The discrepancies were glaring. In her notes, Dr. Morrison had documented a clear pattern of emotional abuse, potential physical abuse, and credible fear for safety. In her official report, all of that had been softened, qualified, explained away. Dr. Morrison, I said when I called her, my name is Emma Lawson. I'm an attorney representing Jessica Hendricks's interests. I need to talk to you about your report to the court. I don't know what you're talking about. I submitted my professional assessment. You submitted a lie. And I have your session notes to prove it. Silence. Dr. Morrison, I'm not interested in destroying your career, but I need to know what happened. Did someone ask you to change your report? More silence. Then quietly, I could lose my license. You could lose your license for submitting a fraudulent report to the court. Or you could help me understand what happened, and maybe we can protect you as a whistleblower. He said it would be better for Jessica in the long run, that if she looked too unstable, she'd lose custody completely, that a softer approach would let her maintain a relationship with her kids. Who said that? Richard Chen. He came to my office. He was very persuasive. Did he threaten you? Not exactly, but he knew things. About my practice? About a malpractice complaint from 3 years ago that was dismissed. He said it would be a shame if something like that came up again, especially with the new medical board regulations. Dr. Morrison, I need you to make a statement, an affidavit describing exactly what Richard Chen said and did. I can't. If I do, he'll destroy me. If you don't, he'll destroy Jessica. And he'll keep doing this to other people. How many other reports have you changed for him? The pause told me everything. 3, she whispered. Over the past 2 years, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what else to do. Make the statement. I'll protect you, that's what I do. It took another week to convince her, but finally, Dr. Morrison signed an affidavit detailing Richard Chen's coercion, his threats, his systematic manipulation of her professional testimony. I submitted it to the court. The judge was furious. The custody hearing was postponed pending an investigation. And I filed a bar complaint against Richard Chen. Not as a scorned ex-wife, as a licensed attorney with documented evidence of witness tampering and fraud upon the court. The Bar Association couldn't ignore this one. But I wasn't done. I had 4 more cases to go. The Morrison estate case was next. In my previous timeline, Margaret Morrison, Dr. Sarah Morrison's mother, ironically, had died in 2020 under suspicious circumstances. Her caretaker, a man named Anthony Fletcher, had somehow gotten her to transfer her entire estate to him in the weeks before her death. The family had contested it, but Richard Chen had represented Fletcher, and his defense had been airtight. Too airtight. I'd discovered in my previous timeline that 3 witnesses who'd seen Margaret Morrison in her final weeks had initially told investigators she was confused, disoriented, clearly not competent to make major decisions. But by the time they testified in court, they'd all changed their stories. Margaret had been sharp as a tack, they said, completely in control. It was 2019 when I first heard Margaret Morrison was in declining health. Sarah Morrison mentioned it during one of our conversations about the Hendricks case. Her mother was 87, had dementia, was in a nursing home. She's got a caretaker she really likes, Sarah said. Anthony something. He's very attentive. Anthony Fletcher. I remembered the name from my research. That's good, I said carefully. Make sure the family stays involved, though. Sometimes caretakers can take advantage. Oh, Anthony would never. He's been wonderful. 6 months later, Sarah called me in tears. My mother changed her will. She left everything to Anthony. Everything, the house, her savings, all of it. We had no idea until she died. I'm sorry for your loss, I said. And I was, but I was also grimly satisfied. This was playing out exactly as I'd known it would. Are you going to contest it? How can we? Her lawyer says she was competent when she signed the documents. That it was her choice. Who's her lawyer? Some estate attorney Anthony recommended, but Anthony's lawyer is Richard Chen. Of course he was. Sarah, listen to me. I think your mother was manipulated, and I think I can prove it. I started with the nursing home staff. In my previous timeline, they'd been too scared to talk. This time, I had credibility. I had a reputation as someone who protected whistleblowers. The nurse who'd cared for Margaret in her final weeks agreed to meet me. She wasn't competent, she said bluntly. She didn't know where she was half the time. She thought I was her sister who died 20 years ago, but Anthony kept bringing these lawyers in, and she'd sign whatever they put in front of her. Did you report this? To my supervisor. She said it wasn't our place to interfere in family matters. But Margaret's real family barely ever visited. It was just Anthony day after day. Would you be willing to testify to that? If I do, I'll lose my job. Not if you're protected as a whistleblower. I can help with that. It took time, but I built the case piece by piece. The nurse's testimony, the other staff members who'd seen the same thing, the handwriting expert who confirmed that Margaret's signature on the new will was shaky, inconsistent with her earlier signatures, suggesting diminished capacity. And then I found the smoking gun. In my previous timeline, I'd heard rumors that Anthony Fletcher had been accused of the same thing before, with a different elderly patient in a different state. But the case had been sealed, the records inaccessible. This time I knew where to look. I had friends from law school working in that state's attorney general's office. I knew which cases to ask about. Anthony Fletcher had been investigated for elder abuse in Oregon in 2015. The case had been dropped when the victim died before trial, and Fletcher had agreed to leave the state. No charges, no record, just a quiet exit. But the investigation file still existed, and my friend was willing to testify that it showed a clear pattern of predatory behavior targeting vulnerable elderly people. I brought all of it to the Morrison family. We filed a petition to void the will based on undue influence and lack of capacity. And we named Richard Chen in a separate complaint for knowingly facilitating elder abuse. Because that was the thing I'd learned in my previous timeline. Richard had known. He'd known about Fletcher's history, known about Margaret's condition, and he'd helped it happen anyway. The case went to trial. Richard Chen's defense was smooth, practiced, but I was ready for every argument. I knew his playbook because I'd seen him use it before. The judge ruled in our favor. Margaret Morrison's real will, the one she'd signed years earlier when she was healthy, was reinstated. Anthony Fletcher was charged with elder abuse, and Richard Chen was facing his second bar complaint in a year. But I still had 3 more. The Zhang business dispute was trickier. In my previous timeline, it hadn't happened until 2021. But I could speed things up. David Zhang owned a small tech company that had developed a valuable patent. His business partner, Michael Torres, had tried to steal it by claiming the work was his own and the contract they'd signed allocated ownership to him. Richard Chen had represented Torres. The key evidence was an email chain showing that Zhang had done all the creative work. But in court, that email chain had been ruled inadmissible because of a technical discovery violation. Zhang's original lawyer had submitted it 3 days late. Except it wasn't really late. Richard Chen had filed a motion to expedite discovery, gotten it approved without the other side's lawyer noticing, and then claimed the evidence was submitted past the deadline. In this timeline, David Zhang hadn't even met Michael Torres yet. But I knew they would. Torres was a networking regular at tech industry events, always looking for his next opportunity. So I started attending those events, made connections, became known as a lawyer who helped small tech companies protect their intellectual property. When David Zhang and Michael Torres started working together in early 2020, I reached out to Zhang. I know you don't know me, but I wanted to offer some free advice. Make sure your partnership agreement is ironclad. Make sure ownership of any patents is clearly defined in writing. He was grateful, took my advice, drew up a contract that explicitly stated any patent developed during the partnership would be jointly owned unless the work was done solely by one party, in which case that party owned it. When Zhang developed his patent, a new algorithm for data compression, he documented everything, every line of code, every iteration, every decision. And when Torres tried to claim it was his work, Zhang had irrefutable proof. Torres hired Richard Chen anyway, and Richard Chen tried the same trick, filed a motion to expedite discovery, tried to get Zhang's evidence ruled inadmissible on a technicality. But this time, I was Zhang's lawyer, and I was ready. Your Honor, I said at the hearing, This motion to expedite was filed without proper notice to the opposing party. Mr. Chen submitted it directly to Chambers without copying us, then claimed we'd been notified. We have proof that we received no notice until after the deadline had passed. Richard's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or concern. Do you have that proof? The judge asked. Email logs, yes, showing that we received Mr. Chen's supposed notification email 3 hours after the deadline, and that it was backdated to appear as if it had been sent earlier. The judge was not pleased. Mr. Chen, is this true? There must have been a technical issue with our email system. A technical issue that conveniently backdates emails? I don't think so. The judge denied the motion. Zhang's evidence was admitted. Torres lost the case, and Richard Chen was facing his third bar complaint. I could see the cracks forming. Richard's confidence was slipping. His practice was suffering. Clients were starting to ask questions. But I had 2 more nails for his coffin. The Patterson medical malpractice case was personal. In my previous timeline, Rebecca Patterson's son had died because of a doctor's negligence. But Richard Chen had defended the doctor by producing medical records that showed the boy had pre-existing conditions that contributed to his death. Except the boy hadn't had those conditions. The records had been altered. In this timeline, I couldn't prevent the death. That tragedy had already happened in 2021 before I'd even graduated law school. But I could make sure Rebecca Patterson got justice. I reached out to her after reading about the case in the news. Mrs. Patterson, my name is Emma Lawson. I'm an attorney, and I think your son's doctor is lying about his medical history. She was drowning in grief, barely functional. But she let me look at the records. I knew what to look for. The alterations were subtle. A note added here, a test result changed there, but I'd seen them before. And I knew who would have the original records, Rebecca herself. Do you have any of Jason's medical records at home? Old printouts, anything from before the incident? I kept everything. I'm his mother. I was supposed to keep track of his health. The records she had didn't match the records submitted to court. I brought in a forensic document examiner, the court records, showed signs of digital alteration, metadata that didn't match, formatting inconsistencies, timestamps that didn't align. But more than that, I subpoenaed the doctor's office's computer system. And I found the originals, the real medical records before they'd been changed. Someone at the doctor's office had altered them, and that someone had been paid by Richard Chen's firm. I had the bank records to prove it. Rebecca Patterson's case was reopened. The doctor lost his license. The person who'd altered the records was charged with fraud, and Richard Chen was facing his 4th bar complaint. 1 more to go. The Kumar immigration case was the hardest, because in my previous timeline, it had resulted in a family being separated, children being sent to a country they'd never known, lives being destroyed. And it was all because Richard Chen had deliberately filed paperwork late. The Kumars had been in the United States for 15 years. Their children were American citizens. They'd been on a path to legal residency when a paperwork error threw everything into chaos. They'd hired a lawyer to fix it. That lawyer had gotten sick, transferred the case to Richard Chen. Richard Chen had waited until the day after the deadline to file the critical motion. The deportation order had been enforced. The family had been torn apart. In this timeline, the Kumar's original lawyer got sick in early 2023. I'd been tracking the case, waiting for this moment. When the lawyer reached out to find someone to take over his cases, I volunteered. The Kumar case is time-sensitive, as he told me. There's a motion that needs to be filed by March 15th. If you miss that deadline, the family will be deported. I understand. I'll handle it. I filed the motion on March 1st, 2 weeks early. I hand-delivered it to the court, got a stamped receipt, and sent copies to everyone involved. The Kumars were granted their stay of deportation. Their case proceeded through the system, and eventually they got their green cards. But I wasn't done. I filed a bar complaint against Richard Chen for the Kumar case from my previous timeline. The one where he'd let the deadline pass, where he'd destroyed a family through negligence or malice or both. Except I couldn't prove it. That timeline didn't exist anymore. In this timeline, I'd handled the case and the Kumars were safe. So I did something different. I found the other cases, The other immigrant families Richard Chen had failed because he'd done it before and he'd do it again. His pattern was clear to anyone who knew where to look. I found 6 families, 6 cases where critical deadlines had been missed, where paperwork had been filed incorrectly, where people's lives had been upended by mistakes that benefited Richard Chen's actual clients. The companies that wanted to avoid immigration compliance, the individuals who wanted their ex-spouses deported, the businesses that wanted to exploit undocumented workers without consequences. I brought all 6 families together. We filed a class action complaint against Richard Chen for systematic negligence and discrimination in immigration cases, and that was the 5th case, the one that finally broke him. The Bar Association's investigation took 8 months. 8 months during which Richard Chen's practice collapsed. Clients left him. His partners forced him out of his own firm. His reputation, built over 20 years, crumbled. I watched it happen with a sense of deep satisfaction. This was what he'd done to Jessica Hendricks, to the Morrison family, to David Zhang, to Rebecca Patterson, to the Kumars. This was what he'd done to me in a timeline that no longer existed. The Bar Association's decision came down on a Tuesday. I was in my office when my phone rang. Ms. Lawson, this is Patricia Hendricks from the State Bar Association. I wanted to inform you that our investigation into Richard Chen has concluded. And? Mr. Chen has been disbarred, effective immediately. The evidence you provided across 5 separate cases showed a clear pattern of ethical violations, witness tampering, evidence manipulation, and fraud upon the court. We found your complaints to be substantiated and credible. 5 cases: the Hendricks divorce, the Morrison estate, the Zhang business dispute, the Patterson medical malpractice, the Kumar immigration class action. Not 6, not my case, because my case didn't exist in this timeline. I'd never married Marcus, never been destroyed by Richard Chen's machinations, never had to file a complaint as a desperate, powerless ex-wife with no credibility. Instead, I'd become a lawyer. I'd become exactly the kind of person who could take Richard Chen down. Thank you for letting me know, I said. Ms. Lawson, if I may, your work on these cases has been exceptional. The thoroughness of your investigation, the quality of your evidence, the way you protected the witnesses. You've done a real service to the legal profession. After I hung up, I sat in my office for a long moment. Then I opened my drawer and pulled out a folder I'd kept for 5 years. Inside was a single text message printed out and saved. You think you can do better than me? You're nobody, Emma. You'll always be nobody. I smiled. My phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway. Emma Lawson. The voice was familiar in a way that made my stomach drop. It's Richard Chen. I said nothing. I know what you did. I know it was you. All 5 cases, all perfectly timed, all perfectly executed. That's not coincidence. That's someone who knew exactly what to look for and when to look for it. I'm an attorney who specializes in legal ethics violations. It's my job to find patterns. No, it's more than that. You knew things you shouldn't have known. About Morrison's mother, about Zhang's patent, about the immigration cases. You knew before they happened. My heart was racing, but I kept my voice steady. Are you accusing me of something, Richard? Because I should warn you, this call is being recorded, and as a disbarred attorney, you have no privilege. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just trying to understand. We'd never even met before the Hendricks case. I'd never wronged you, so why? Why did you dedicate years of your life to destroying me? I could have lied. Could have said it was about justice, about protecting the vulnerable, about doing the right thing. All of that was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. You don't remember me, I said quietly. But in another life, you destroyed me. You helped my husband steal everything I'd worked for. You coached witnesses and falsified evidence and made sure I walked away from 8 years of marriage with nothing. And when I tried to hold you accountable, you threatened my family until I backed down. Then you won, and I lost. And I died knowing you'd gotten away with it. Silence on the other end. That doesn't make sense, he said finally. Why not? I know it doesn't make sense, but it's the truth. You took everything from me, so I came back and I took everything from you. Consider us even. I hung up before he could respond. That night, I went to visit Mom. She was in her garden, healthy and strong, her cancer in remission for the fourth year running. The treatments had worked in this timeline, just like they had in the other one. But this time, she'd never had to worry about losing her insurance. Because David had never worked for Marcus's company. Because I'd never married Marcus. Because everything was different. "Hey, sweetheart," she said when she saw me. "You look happy." "I am happy." "Work going well?" "Very well. I just closed a big case." She hugged me, dirt from her gardening gloves smudging my jacket, and I held on tight. In my previous life, I'd lost her when I was 30. She died while I was in the middle of my divorce, and I'd been too broke to give her a proper funeral. I'd spread her ashes alone in the rain with no one but the funeral director as a witness. In this life, she was 62 and healthy and making plans to travel to Italy next spring. "I'm proud of you," she said. "You know that, right? You've built something real, something that matters." "Thanks, Mom." "That Marcus character who keeps calling me, though, you should probably block him." I pulled back. "Marcus is calling you?" "Started about a month ago, wanting to know how you're doing, if you're seeing anyone, if I think you'd be willing to talk to him. I told him you'd moved on and he should too." Marcus. I'd almost forgotten about him. In this timeline, we'd broken up before the wedding. He'd married someone else, the marketing assistant actually, just a few years earlier than in my previous timeline. I'd heard through the grapevine that it hadn't worked out. She'd divorced him and taken half his assets, which had pleased me enormously. "If he calls again, just hang up," I said. "Oh, I have been. But Emma, he mentioned something strange. He said his old lawyer got disbarred and he wondered if you had anything to do with it." I smiled. "I might have." "Good for you, sweetie. That man was always a snake." That weekend, I was at a coffee shop working on a case when someone slid into the seat across from me. I looked up, ready to tell whoever it was that the seat was taken. It was Marcus. He looked older than I remembered, tired. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, and his expensive suit couldn't hide the slight paunch he'd developed. "Emma, you've been avoiding my calls." "I haven't been avoiding them, I just haven't answered them. There's a difference." "We need to talk." "No, we don't. We broke up 7 years ago. There's nothing to talk about." "I made a mistake. I should have married you without the prenup. I should have trusted you. I was young and stupid and listening to the wrong people." "You were listening to Richard Chen." "Yeah, and look how that turned out. He's been disbarred, his career is over. And I heard—" He paused. "I heard you were involved in that." "I'm a lawyer who specializes in legal ethics. Richard Chen violated legal ethics. The math isn't complicated. It's more than that. The timing, the cases you chose, it's like you knew exactly where to hit him. Like you had a personal vendetta." I closed my laptop. "Marcus, I'm going to tell you something, and you're going to think I'm crazy. But I don't care anymore whether you believe me or not." "Okay." "In another timeline, we got married. You hid your assets, you cheated on me, you divorced me, and Richard Chen made sure I got nothing. Then he threatened my family until I withdrew the bar complaint I filed against him. And then I died in a car accident, broke and alone and defeated." He stared at me. That's insane." "I know, but it's also true. I got a second chance. And I used it to become everything you said I couldn't be. I became a lawyer. I became successful. I became someone who could take down people like Richard Chen. And I destroyed him the way he destroyed me. Emma, and you know what the best part is? In this timeline, you never got to destroy me. You never got the chance. Because I saw you for what you were early enough to walk away. So whatever regret you're feeling, whatever reconciliation you're hoping for, it's 7 years too late. I've moved on. I suggest you do the same." I stood up, gathered my things, and walked out of the coffee shop. I didn't look back. Marcus tried to call a few more times after that, but I never answered. Eventually, he stopped trying. 6 months later, I got a letter. It was from Richard Chen. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. Dear Ms. Lawson, I've spent the past year trying to understand what happened. I've replayed every case, every decision, every moment where things went wrong. And I keep coming back to what you said on the phone about another life, about me destroying you. I don't know if what you told me is true. I don't know if it's possible. But I find myself believing you anyway. Because there's no other explanation for how perfectly you anticipated my every move, how thoroughly you dismantled my career, how precisely you targeted my weaknesses. You knew me better than I knew myself. And the only way that makes sense is if you'd seen me work before, if you'd experienced it firsthand. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it, in this life or any other. I'm writing because I need you to know you were right. I was dirty. I did terrible things. I told myself I was just doing my job, just representing my clients to the best of my ability. But I knew. Deep down, I always knew. I destroyed lives because it was profitable. I manipulated evidence because I could get away with it. I threatened witnesses because it won cases. And I never faced consequences because I was too good at covering my tracks. Until you. You took everything from me, my career, my reputation, my sense of self, and I'm grateful for it. Because for the first time in my life, I'm facing the truth of what I've done. I'm sitting with the weight of it. And I'm trying to figure out how to be better. I don't know if I can be, but I'm trying. If there really was another timeline where I destroyed you, where I helped your husband steal your life and then threatened your family into silence, I'm sorry. I'm so, so sorry. And if there wasn't, if this is all in your head or mine, I'm still sorry because I know I'm capable of exactly what you described. I've done it to other people. The only difference is that in this timeline, you stopped me before I could do it to you. Thank you for that. Richard Chen. I read the letter twice. Then I filed it away in the same folder as Marcus's text message. Evidence of the life I'd left behind. Proof that I'd won. 5 years after Richard Chen's disbarment, my practice had grown to 15 attorneys. We specialized in legal ethics violations, whistleblower protection, and cases of institutional corruption. We'd taken down 3 more dirty lawyers, 2 judges, and a district attorney who'd been suppressing exculpatory evidence for years. I'd become exactly what I'd set out to be. Someone who protected people from the Richard Chens of the world. Someone who had the power and the knowledge and the credibility to fight back. I'd also started teaching, a seminar at Harvard Law School on legal ethics and professional responsibility. My students called it the hardest class they'd ever taken, but also the most important. One of them asked me once, "Professor Lawson, you seem to know every trick in the book, every way a lawyer can cheat the system. How?" I'd smiled. Because I've seen what happens when lawyers cheat. I've seen the damage it does, and I've made it my life's work to make sure they don't get away with it. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was true enough. On the 10-year anniversary of my rebirth, I went back to the intersection where I'd died. It was just a normal corner in a normal city, nothing special about it. The traffic light cycled through its colors. Cars passed by, life went on. I stood there for a long time, thinking about the woman I'd been, the one who'd signed that withdrawal form, the one who'd died defeated and alone. She didn't exist anymore. She'd never exist. In her place was someone stronger, someone who'd taken the worst thing that had ever happened to her and turned it into fuel, someone who'd spent a decade making sure other people didn't have to suffer the way she had. My phone buzzed. A text from my assistant. New client wants to consult about her divorce lawyer, says something's not right with how he's handling her case. Name is Jennifer Martinez. I texted back. Schedule her for tomorrow, morning if possible. Another case. Another person who needed help. Another chance to use what I knew, what I'd learned, what I'd become. I got in my car, a Tesla this time, not a beat-up Honda, and drove to my office. I had work to do. Richard Chen was disbarred, Marcus was alone, and I was free. The world had given me a second chance, and I'd used it to become exactly who I was meant to be. Not Emma Lawson, the scared paralegal who'd let herself be destroyed. Emma Lawson, the lawyer who made sure people like Richard Chen faced consequences. Emma Lawson, who'd taken her death and turned it into someone else's downfall. Emma Lawson, who'd won.